Okay, here we're going to take a look at image traps. Generally speaking, images are not something I use an awful lot in ultrafractal. But there are quite a lot of people that do use them. Quite honestly, if I'm going to edit images, I'll use Photoshop or something else for that. However, I mean, it's included in the program thanks to a lot of people really. I think Damien Jones had an image import formula originally, and more recently, I think in UF5, Ron Barnett has included support for image traps via a plugin formula he's written for the outside coloring or inside coloring, as the case may be. So let's take a look at it. I mean, what I've done is I've created a starting point, and we're going to basically just add the image traps layer to it. Or we're going to add two layers. One of them is going to actually include the image, and the other is going to be basically a frame for the image. Okay. So let me just go ahead and open the file. You can actually work along. This is included within the param set file, which is included with the course, and also I'm going to supply a standalone UFR for it just in case. So I'm going to maximize this. Okay, and the first thing we're going to do, this is basically what I've created. Just it's nothing new. It's all stuff we've covered up to now. You can examine these three layers to see basically what I've been doing. Let's just go ahead and rename them first of all. Okay, this one's a Harlequin, so this is Harley 2. So Harley 2, and I think it's what did this do basically? Okay, this is kind of just added this kind of nice coloring to it. So it'll be a coloring there, as will the layer below it, which is also Harley 2. So Harley 2. Okay, so let's add a new layer, and we're going to call this again, you can add that and we could add on top of it, but for the purpose of this tutorial I think we'll stick with what I've got here. I'm going to rename this image traps or traps with frame. Okay, and we're going to call this one image traps. Okay, image traps. Okay, turn off the visibility of the image traps frame for a sec. Okay, with the traps with frame, what we're going to do is drag out the layer properties panel first. I'm going to click in the outside coloring tab, and what we're going to do is to browse to REB5. Okay, and browse down. Excuse me. We have image traps within the reb5.ucl. Okay, I want to turn the layer opacity to normal, 100%. Okay, looks like we have a full gradient. Let's turn off repeat gradient. Okay, let's see what options we have. If I go down, okay, what we see is the trap shape here by default is by foliant. These are Ron's, obviously he's been working with his own. Okay, from what we've done before, you will recall that the Damien Jones point formula gives us some nice sort of roundy shape, so you can also choose a rectangular. Basically, let me have a look here. If we go down here, point is what we're going to use as a nice roundy one. You can experiment with this, different shapes. There's a nice rectangular one here as well. Okay, we're going to choose the roundy one. Click open. Okay, we're going to call up the gradient by F4. Right click in the opacity field or opacity channel, check link color and opacity. We're going to drag down the, it's okay, here it's on the right side. Okay, drag down the opacity of that black surround, which I don't want. Okay, command click to add a point, drag down. Okay, again on this line here, or this part of the graph, command click, drag down the point. Okay, so we get nice sort of sharp. Okay, what I didn't want to do there was drag it out that far. I'm going to drag it over to the left and in. Okay. Now what I want here is this white and this orange to be black. So let's get we have this orange selected, so let's drag that down. Okay, let's drag the white one down. Let's drag it way over. Now with this red, let's create another point as close to it as possible. Okay, so command click to create a point. Okay, we'll drag this out a bit. Okay, even as far as the white. Okay, drag this one over a little bit. I want basically this kind of border going around the edge. I'll take this black over as well. Like a nice sort of sharp. We've kind of nice sharp circular shapes there. We could actually take down the opacity a touch on this black as well. Okay, just to show through a little bit of the fractal through. Okay, enough so you can just about make it out. Okay, now we're going to. Okay, we haven't added any images, we added a frame. Okay, now let's duplicate. We've duplicated the layer already. Let's go up to the image traps layer now. Okay. Now the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to select all. Basically, I think if I can click it anywhere here is Command A. Okay, not in this case. What I want to do here is right click, select all. Okay, common error here is if you don't click I said I copied the layer before I'd added the link color and opacity, therefore it's not checked here, so I've got to go back link color and opacity, then right click, select all. Okay, and I want to drag down the opacity of everything. Okay, so we've got no gradient whatsoever. Let's close the gradient browser because we don't need it. Now if we go back to our outside coloring, which is here about, okay, we've got to go down to traps with frame. Okay, what we want to do is toggle down copy, and we want to copy this outside coloring to what I have Harlequin up here above. So I can actually go Command Option V to paste it, if you remember that shortcut from earlier on. Okay, so we've basically got an image traps outside coloring with no gradient. And what we're going to do is apply the image on top of, basically we're going to stamp it on top of these circles. Okay, now as far as I know, the images used in ultrafractal have to be in .png, portable network graphics format, regardless of whether they're transparent or not. What I've done basically is using Photoshop, I have created in this guy, I've used a shape, a rabbit shape, which I think is one of the standard shapes that come with the program. And basically I've just filled it with a color on a transparent background and saved that as a PNG file, and we're going to import that now. Okay, so if I basically scroll down here, what we're interested here is images and colorings. Okay, colors, there's nothing there, no color. Okay, where do I put the image? Okay, nowhere here to put an image. I've got to click on images and colorings, as it would say here. It's got a no color. Okay, suggesting it's just colorings, but there's the clue, images. So let's click on this, open the browser, and we go up to color trap image tiles here, double click on that. Okay, still nothing. We've got to add the image, of course. So we've now toggled this open. Okay, and this time we have an option to import an image. So if we right click on here, we want to go to we're on the desktop. I've got it here in a folder I set up. and it is misspelled here, but I've got rabbit.png, rabbit.png. Okay, open. Okay, I've got all sorts of weird things going on. First of all, the layer blend mode is set to hard light, so let's set that to normal. We'll take the opacity up to 100%. Okay, and it still looks pretty weird. Let's play with the image scale. Okay, because just from experience, the image scale is what's causing us the problem here. So if we click in the image scale field, okay, bring up the Explorer. Okay, now the trick here is basically getting bigger. Okay, in other words, from 1 upwards, the image gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So I'm going to go up to around 4 for the moment. Okay, now I've got the shape of the rabbit. Might be a bit too big, so what I'll do, 4.5, let's make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to plug in 5 here. Okay, and that's it basically. I mean, you can close the file here. You know, it looks kind of interesting here. What I'm going to do basically is, because you're not seeing an awful lot of the image, and I think this could be a more interesting image, so we'll change the actual the profile from landscape to portrait. So if you remember what we did previously with this, like I got all my panels upside down, so the layer should be there. So what I did previously is click on the image tab in the Fractal Properties panel. I want to change the width to 640 or to 480, and the height to 640. Okay. We'll check maintain ratio. Okay, it looks kind of interesting. Let's shift click drag down to the left to zoom out. Okay, zoom out again. Okay, and I think you'll agree with me, that's a much more interesting image than what we had a second ago. I'm going to add a bit more width to this, and you know, we'll leave it at that. So I'm going to uncheck maintain width ratio again. I'm going to go 550 instead of having it in a square format. That should do us. Okay, zoom out a little bit, reposition it. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this with its parameters into the param file. So to do that, I go Command A, okay, which opens up the save parameters set dialog. As you can see, I've already got the rabbit habit start in here someplace. There it is. Okay, and I'm going to call this rabbit habit finished. Okay, and what I'd encourage you to do basically is try to follow this. Okay, try to follow just those steps and experiment with different shapes and different images, etc. Okay, you can make some really interesting images just with a little bit of effort. Actually, I'm going to increase this, and I'm going to actually save this slightly larger version as the UFR. So File, Save As, Finished Image Traps, Save. Okay, so that's it for the image traps lesson. We'll have a look at other uses of images in the next lesson. Alright, in this lesson we're going to look at something a little bit different, a different use for images. If you recall in a previous module which we did on mappings, one of the mappings we used was called a clipping map. Okay, and we use it kind of as a standalone to create a frame. Okay, in other words, you could define a shape on the screen and use that to basically modify opacity and transparency of other objects which were actually mapped to it. In much the same way, and indeed in Photoshop, I think it was a guy called Deep McClelland, who's a Photoshop teacher, possibly coined the phrase clipping mask, and I can't think of a better way to describe it, quite honestly. If you use a shape which has transparency, okay, to basically attach a texture to, in other words, you're attaching the texture to the opaque part of that layer. As we've seen, explained in previous modules, like when you remember the mask with the black and white area, think of the opacity in terms of the white color in the mask, okay? And that's what we're applying the texture to. Okay, with images though, we have a slight difference in ultrafractal, in that the gradient has absolutely no effect. So you can't basically use the gradient, and like we've done in previous lessons with an image, just click in the actual gradient field, right click, and then say invert, because nothing happens. So to prove that, let's go ahead and we'll change. Actually, before I do anything, I just wanted to actually mention that I did say in the last lesson that as far as I know, all images needed to be PNGs. That was kind of a bit was wrong, but I think you can use possibly BMPs and definitely JPEGs. But if you want transparency, you must use a PNG. Okay. So in the case of basically clipping masks, you're going to need to use a PNG. Also, it's a good idea to keep the ratio. In other words, if your image is basically whatever it is, say it's 1280 by 960, okay, it's a very good idea to keep your actual fractal in 640 by 480. In other words, the same dimensions. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, so it'll actually sit perfectly within the frame. Okay, that's as far as the images you're going to use as masks go. If you want them centered and to fill the whole screen, the masks or the images you're going to use as textures or whatever to overlay don't matter so much. You can resize them and move them as you see fit. The mask is something you want in place and you don't want to move. Okay. Also, as I mentioned with the gradient, you can't create a reverse mask using an image. So what you need to do basically is you have to have a jigsaw. You need the two parts of the image. In other words, the image with the cutout, and then the image. You need one image with the cutout, and the other image the fill. In other words, one image will have the cutout, i.e. the transparency, and the other will have the image, and the surrounding area will be the transparency. Okay. So with that in mind, we'll start the lesson. Again, we're dealing with images which are bitmaps, so we'll go into formula, okay, outside formula. In the standards UCL, we have an option for, I beg your pardon, I'm looking for JPEG. Thinking in terms of the colouring the cart before the horse. Okay, we want the formula JPEG or sorry, jp.ufm, or you can use the MT version as we've seen in the previous lesson. Let's go to location, okay, and we'll reset the location to have everything nice and cushy in the center. Okay, the outside colouring in the standard UCL, we have image. Okay, so click on image, and what we're going to do here is import the image. Okay, which has we're going to import apple.png. Okay, so open that, and as you can see, we have an apple, the apple, and on the outside we've got transparency all around. We're going to now, so as not to confuse you, we're going to add the textures to this before we actually add the outside part of the jigsaw. So we'll duplicate the layer. Okay, we're going to click on the open image icon again, and here we're going to use okay, I've got two called untitled. Okay, we're going to use just one I call untitled.jpg. Okay, okay, now this is kind of big. You can resize this as you want. Basically, to resize it, you're going to have to shift click on the magnifying icon here, and as you know from experience now, is shift click drag down to the left to make it smaller, or shift click to make it bigger. Okay, I'm not even going to bother. I'm going to just keep it as it came in. And what I'm going to do without any further ado is take the background and I'm going to add the mask to it. Okay. Now let's go ahead, click on layer 1. Okay, we'll call this rename inside texture. Inside texture. Okay, let's add or duplicate the layer. Okay, here we're going to add the outside of the apple. Okay, apple outside.png. Okay, so already you can see it looks kind of neat. I want this black for a reason, because the texture I'm going to have, I want to tone it down. If I don't have it there, it's going to be toning down to transparency. So what I'm going to need to do is create another layer which I'm going to use as the mask. Okay, I'm going to call this mask. Okay. Mask outside. Okay, and let's call this just rename it outside back. Okay, because we're going to have we're going to have opacity. Okay, on top of the mask outside, let's add the texture on top of this. So we'll duplicate the layer, right click it, rename outside text or outside texture. Okay, let's bring in the image. Untitled 2 this time. Okay, so it's kind of this is a fractal I generated with the other program I'm very fond of, is Quadrium 2 some time back. Actually, both of these textures are both generated with that program. We're going to basically use mask outside, and we're going to use that to make the mask. Okay, it's, as you see, I've no way, basically, just to prove it to you, I've no way, no gradients. Even if I unmask this, okay, as you see, I've got black, I've got no gradient whatsoever, absolutely no, does nothing. You're dealing solely with images. This is why I tend to avoid, I mean, you can add gradients on top and add color, etc. But I tend to avoid using images in ultrafractal. Not to say always, but I mean, I do use them on occasion, but not much. Okay, and that's basically what I wanted. I just wanted that black background there, so I could tone this down a little bit, get something I like. So that's basically it for the lesson. Not much in it. You know, if you call that fractaling, it's pretty much the same as you do in any image editing program, just using clipping masks. But it needs, you know, what I wanted to demonstrate was it was another use, at least for images. You know, I could reposition this slightly. Let's have a look. If I shift click on that texture, okay, just to reposition it a little bit, so I get it nice and central. I'm going to save this. Control A. We're going to call this image masks. Okay, in the parameter set file, save that. I'm going to save it as a UFR. Save as image masks UFR. Okay, and I'm basically going to call it done for this.